Who's your commander?
Good luck.
Equip.
Move to combat.
Resolves.
Now, before you attack
Does
me,
anyone have an answer?
well played.
Good game.
Hello, you're watching the Jumbo Commander YouTube channel with me, DJ, and today I want to talk about a brand new commander out of Commander 2019. Let's talk about eggs. Atla Palani Nest Tender is 1 red, green, white for a 2/3 legendary human shaman. You can pay 2 and tap to create a 0/1 green egg creature token with Defender. Whenever an egg you control dies, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card. Put that card onto the battlefield and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Atla is a Naya Polymorph commander. I'm so excited, not only because of the mechanics of putting huge creatures onto the battlefield, but also about the flavor. You make an egg dies, and a huge monster pops out. One thing that's really great is that Atla creates your own eggs, but we can look for other eggs in Magic because it's not just limited to the eggs that Atla creates. Finally, we're going to pack this deck full of big creatures, and we're going to examine a little bit of what makes a polymorph deck really work. And one thing that we're going to notice is that we are not going to have a really robust package of big creatures, so we're going to need to fill in the gaps of this deck to make sure it's reliable and also plays really well. So the first thing I want to do is break down the polymorph mechanic and find out what makes a polymorph deck really work. One classic commander of polymorph is Jalira, Master Polymorphist. Notice this is a blue commander, and traditionally polymorph effects have been found in blue. Jalira can take a creature, put it on the bottom of your library, and pop out a brand new big old fatty. And the way that you get that creature to put on the bottom of your library is usually through creature lands, basically non-creature spells that create creature like Kasizma right here, or spells that generate creatures like this Callous Dismissal. And then you only pack your deck full of the biggest, baddest creatures, and then poof, they've been created. And so Atla can do something pretty similar to this, but there are a few weird things going on. So Atla creates her own eggs, so we don't need to worry about other egg creatures in the deck or things that turn into creatures. But that does mean that there's a limiting factor in the ways to make eggs. Let's say we have Rock Egg in our deck. Fine. That's an egg card that we can play, and then Atla can get rid of it and make something huge. But if we have a rock egg in our deck, that means that we could theoretically polymorph into a rock egg. We go through all this trouble. We get our commander on the battlefield. We create an egg. We somehow get that egg to die, and then our reward is another egg. No, we're not going to have Russian nesting dolls full of eggs in this deck. So we have to strike a very careful balance of eggs to big creatures, and be really careful that we're not building a deck that's 1000% reliant on our commander, because we play that once or twice and then your whole playgroup knows, oh, all you got to do is kill Atla and then this deck just doesn't function. No, we don't want that. We want to be able to have this deck be robust. Okay, that's why we're going to pay extra attention to our enablers and our payoffs. One thing that's good, though, is that we do have a lot of enablers that exist in these colors. It used to be blue got them all. Polymorph, Mass Polymorph, Proteus Staff, all of these were traditionally in blue. But recently in commander sets, we got divergent transformations, which can let you do this twice. I like that. There's Reality Scramble that we just got last year, and we can use this with any permanent type. I'm going to choose creature because we built this deck around it, but there's no harm in upgrading your Soul Ring into something awesome. You can also do this multiple times as well because it has Retrace on it. And then we can look back at green, which has always been good at cheating creatures into play, and play some cards like Defense of the Heart. Now there's one other angle I want to mention, and that is the Sneak Attack, Atali Primal Storm, Ilhar the Razeboar, basically all of these effects for getting big fatties into play, particularly Sneak Attack, I think. I don't know if it's the best card for this particular build, but you can tweak your deck to take advantage of it. Sneak Attack needs a critical mass of big creatures to be able to pay 1 red and put onto the battlefield. And you have so many of them that you don't care if they die. You know, they're just like, oh, put them on the battlefield for a one-off hit. And so I don't know if this deck has that critical mass that you need, but you can build your deck that way. Atali Primal Storm, again, relies on playing off the top of your library. If you want Atali, great, but I don't think this deck has enough top deck manipulation to properly cheat the big creatures into play off of Atali. Similarly, Ilharg the Razeboar is only really truly good if you have those creatures in your hand to put onto the battlefield. So all of these can be enhanced in this deck, meaning you might up the big creature count and include cards like Sneak Attack or Ilharg, or maybe you add a little bit more top deck manipulation and throw Atali in there, or you just maybe want some random funness going on. But really, these are a lot of different angles, and some people will just throw them all into the same deck, but you don't need it. One of the strengths of a Polymorph General is you don't need a ton of targets. All you really need is like 1 or 2 somewhere in your deck, and you will get to those creatures. I struck a middle ground between these two strategies, but I just want you to be super aware of it so that you know what you're getting into when you're building your own version of this deck. Let's talk about eggs. The best thing is that Atla creates your own eggs, and you can go infinite with these own eggs. People have already mentioned Thornbite Staff and Ashnod's Altar, ways to generate mana, ways to untap Atla, ways to produce more eggs, and so on and so forth. You can pull a ton of creatures out of your deck, but there are decks out there that have 3-card combos that are more reliable than Atla. So I don't know if this is the combo enabler that you're rushing towards right now. I feel like Atla is just a cooler commander if you embrace it in different ways. I particularly like the combo of Mirror Entity. You got a bunch of creatures, let's just turn them all into eggs and immediately have them all die, and then you polymorph basically your entire library onto the battlefield. That is a 1-card combo with some other creatures, mind you. You can get some of those creatures without risking putting them into your library by having some man lands. Mutavault is the best man land because it is actually an egg itself. I know, you don't even need Mirror Entity to turn it into an egg. So Mutavault is a slam dunk in this deck. You just tap it to turn it into an egg, and then bam, get rid of it and turn it into some crazy big monster. There are a few other eggs that could find a fit in this deck. Irregular Cohorts, well, it creates 2 eggs. Taurian Mauler is the most aggressive egg I've ever seen. It grows huge in multiplayer games, and Chameleon Colossus can get very, very big if you have enough mana. And by the way, the backup plan of this deck is a big mana deck because you have big creatures in it, so you're going to want to get big mana because you might actually want to cast them one day. So Chameleon Colossus could close out a game for you. Now, I'm not thrilled if I polymorph or egg into these creatures because I'm just egging into more eggs, but at least it's not the rock egg. At least it's not, well, the next few. Universal Automaton, rock egg, rock egg. Okay, these are not good commander cards. They're just not. I don't want to play a 1/1 for 1. I don't want to play these defenders. I'm okay playing Chameleon Colossus or Mirror Entity or these other cards. So on their own, those other cards are fine. On your own, these things stink. And so you're actively making your deck worse by including them, even though they could have a very risky upside of getting you into your big fatty faster. Finally, we have one of the best egg producers, Nesting Dragon, literally producing dragon eggs, and I think it's a big enough beater on its own. 5 mana, 5/4 flyer keeps making more dragons. Yeah, I would be fine polymorphing into this dragon, especially when it brings more eggs with it. And then finally, we can't just leave our eggs to die on their own natural causes. No, we need to sacrifice them with High Market or Goblin Bombardment or Perilous Forays. Again, we run across the situation of, well, are we putting a Goblin Bombardment in our deck when we really don't have a very high creature count? Same thing with Perilous Forays. What if we don't have a high creature count? Because we don't have a ton of creatures in this deck, even though it's a creature-based strategy. That's why I like High Market, because it's basically free. It produces mana, and it is that sacrifice outlet we need. I'm also going to include Grasping Dunes to kill one of those eggs because it just might be exactly what we need, and then we're not including sort of a blank card in our deck. So we've been talking about eggs, we've been talking about sacrificing them, all that stuff. We need to get to the good stuff here. We need to know what we're getting when we go through all these hoops to sacrifice an egg. Well, the first thing we could get are dinosaurs. This could be a dinosaur tribal deck. This is very dinosaur centric. They're literally on Ixalan hatching eggs. Dinosaurs are coming out. Okay. One great thing is that dinosaurs can be pretty budget too. Zatalpa was reprinted and is a fantastic hit. Is huge, is amazing, is 87 cents. Apex Altasaur is also very good, comes on the battlefield and can literally fight all the rest of your eggs, giving you a chain reaction of eggs, putting tons of stuff onto the battlefield, not to mention fighting your opponent's stuff. Could also be included just in the precon that you already got, so it's a good card there. Okay, if you want to go on the top end budget of dinosaurs, Zakama Primal Calamity is great. You don't get the cast trigger when it enters the battlefield, but you don't need it. It's just huge. It destroys stuff. It takes over commander games. And then finally, one lieutenant of this deck could be Jisath Sun's Avatar, coming in at a budget $339 and is big and beefy on its own. Okay, we're going to look at a few different price points across different creature types. And the first thing I want to look at are Eldrazi. And coming in at the inexpensive Eldrazi, we have Artisan of Kozilek and Pathraiser of Ulamog, both of them under $3. And both of them have a significant Annihilator on them. Annihilator 2, Annihilator 3, being very big and very scary. If we want to upgrade the budget in a little bit, then we can put in It That Betrays or Void Winnower. $960, $650, good prices. It That Betrays has Annihilator 2, but also steals your opponent's stuff. A very powerful Eldrazi. And Void Winnower is just a pretty mean card. It can shut down a lot of games. Then, if you want to break the budget and get the highest amount of Annihilator you can, Kozilek Butcher of Truth and Ulamog the Infinite Gyre coming in at, well, about $30 and $23, but Annihilator 4. Yeah, and Indestructible and Ulamog, and if you ever cast these things, they're just huge. I just want to point out, you don't need to spend this budget, but you can if you want to get the biggest Eldrazi possible. All right, let's throw flavor of dinosaurs out. Let's not ignore Eldrazi. Let's just look at some of the biggest creatures that you can pull out of your deck. On the budget level, I love cards like Magmatic Force, Blazing Archon, and Woodfall Primus. Magmatic Force, if left unchecked, can do so much damage because in this multiplayer game, you could be bolting things all over the place, turn after turn after turn. Blazing Archon is just a huge threat because it really locks down the game and people can't react with you the way that they want to. This gives you an opportunity to really launch into even more big creatures. It just gives you so much time. And then Woodfall Primus blows up something significant. It's a trampling recursive threat. Persist is something that should not be discounted with this card. All of these under $3 means that they're great big budget cards. Moving up the list to a little bit more expensive, I've included Kiki-Jiki Mirror Breaker. Just under $11, Kiki-Jiki is a combo masterwork. Okay, he goes crazy with so many cards. Most importantly, with Zealous Conscripts, you can easily make this into a Kiki combo deck. But do you know what I like more? I like Kiki-Jiki copying eggs, sacrificing those egg copies at the end of your turn, and getting more things onto the battlefield. Oh my gosh. I mean, you could also copy a Worldspine Worm, the biggest green creature you can, a 15/15 trample, and this also has a built-in protection, turning into big 5/5 worms. And then also, if it goes in the graveyard from anywhere, you shuffle it into your library. Okay? Do you know where you're getting your big monsters from? The library. I can imagine a deck where you purposefully sacrifice World-Spined Worm to one of your Perilous Flores or your Goblin Bombardment or something like that just to get it back in your library so you can egg into it again. Yeah, crazy. I would be fine if you built this deck with only one creature, World-Spined Worm. Mwah. All right, finally, at the most expensive level of random creatures, we have Vorniclex, Voice of Hunger, Blightsteel Colossus, and Avacyn, Angel of Hope. Vorniclex is just mean, but if you're trying to cheat a big mean green creature onto the battlefield, it really does a good job. Blightsteel Colossus can end a game on its own, which is why it's so expensive. Here's the thing, I'm not gonna, even if I love this deck and I wanted to build the best version of it, I don't think I'd spend $57 on a Blightsteel Colossus. It will be reprinted one day, please, hopefully. Okay. Avacyn, Angel of Hope has always been an expensive angel, coming in at $28. Yeah, it's pricey, but it does give you tons and tons of protection. You should be careful about how your eggs are going to die if they all have indestructible. Okay, I think I'd pick a few cards from this list if I were to build my own version. Going for some of the best cheap dinosaurs, I would splurge on Worldspine Worm because it's great, and then Ipat Betrays. I do want something to annihilate my opponents, and also stealing their stuff is super fun too. So wait a second, we're looking at 6 creatures, a handful of eggs. What am I going to fill the rest of this deck with? There's nothing left. That's actually good. It means that we have a lot of support cards to make sure this strategy runs really well and we can interrupt our opponents. I think the first thing that we need is a robust ramp package. I mentioned earlier that this deck could be interrupted pretty easily, and so if we have a backup plan of ramping into big creatures, that's a viable strategy. That works really well. So I'm going to include cards like Farseek, Cultivate, Pier's Whim, okay? All of these are really great, and I'm going to harp on Pier's Whim because you can get that utility land that you need. You can get Mutavault, you can get High Market, or you can even just fix your mana. If we are talking about a well-rounded deck, and I just talked about ramp, I'm going to talk about card draw. And there's some card draw pitfalls that I want to warn you about. Cards like Skull Clamp, Guardian Project, Outpost Siege, and cards similar to these have been showing up in some deck lists and maybe on EDH Rec. Okay, I don't like them, and I want to point out why. Skull Clamp is a great card, and by the way, you can Skull Clamp these eggs to draw 2 cards and polymorph into a big creature. I mean, that's a very, very good sequence. But I don't like it that that's the only thing that you can really Skull Clamp in this deck. Honestly, if you're making eggs and you have eggs that are turning into big monsters on the battlefield, I feel like you're doing a good job. You don't really need a single card that only synergizes well with one creature. And then when you have your big creatures on the battlefield, you have, your Zatalpa. Skull Clamping that is also not great, especially if you have indestructible creatures. It just works with so few cards in your deck. I feel like it's not reliable card draw. And that's what we want when we want card draw. We want to be able to get us out of bad situations, not propel us ahead when we're already doing a good job. Okay, Guardian Project is similar, along with a lot of other green card draw, which is based on creatures. This deck actually has a very low creature count. Okay, so we need to be very wary of cards that draw based on creatures. Because if we already have a big old beater out, then we don't need extra card draw. Okay. Finally, you'd say red card draw will get us there. Okay, it'll be good. But I'm really skeptical of cards that exile. What if I exile a big creature I want? What if I'm in the ramp phase of this deck and I draw board wipe or other really critical control pieces? And so Outpost Siege is designed for a deck where you can kind of play any piece of it at any point in time. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful card, but in this deck specifically, I feel like you need to be very careful about what you play when. Timing is important, and Outpost Siege doesn't help you with timing. So what pieces of card draw do I recommend? I really like card draw that works on multiple levels. Road of Return. It gets a card back from your graveyard to your hand. You might need that. Okay, and it also helps you get your commander back onto the battlefield. You definitely need that because this deck revolves around your commander. Chandra Flamecaller has a really, really strong wheel effect built in, but Chandra Flamecaller also has a mini board wipe. You could theoretically need some ways to get rid of eggs, and Chandra can do that too. So I really like card draw that might be more situational, but maybe can serve dual purposes, either getting your commander back into play or killing those eggs that you need to kill. And then I'm going to rely more on cards like Harmonize. I don't like paying 4 mana for 3 cards. I'd rather draw 4 or 5 or 6 cards. But Harmonize is just solid. Any point in the game, you can just get that card draw going. You should also pay attention to the removal in this deck. Swords to Plowshare and Chaos Warp. It's an easy include in any white or red deck, right? I mean, it's at the top of every list everywhere. In this deck, it might not be as good. Exiling something might not be as good as destroying something because you might have to turn this on your own eggs. If you exile an egg, nothing happens. If you Chaos Warp an egg, you might get a land or a big creature, but you're probably getting nothing, okay? If you Decimate or Generous Gift, you can kill your own egg, polymorphing into a big creature. See, it serves multiple purposes in these situations, and I think that that's incredibly powerful. Finally, you might want to kill your own eggs in the form of board wipes. My favorite is Tragic Arrogance. It's much better than you're thinking. It's very good, it's political, and it can be cast after you have a big monster on the battlefield, and you can keep that big monster. It's very good. I also like cards that you can cycle away. Sweltering Suns could save you in the early game. It could kill your eggs for you later in the game, and then you can cycle it away if you don't need it. Similarly, Akroma's Vengeance is very flexible as well. But you could just run board wipes like Wrath of God or Pyrohemia, taking out the eggs that you need to get rid of, and then also neutralizing your opponent's board. This deck could be interrupted easily too. They kill your commander a couple times, and finally you feel like you're out of the game and you don't have enough mana to cast your big 8 and 9 drops. Well, in that situation, you have the board wipes to control the game and get to casting your big spells. So pay attention to these 2 or 3 for 1s that you could include in this deck because it will work very well. Similarly, if you have destroy effects, your indestructible creatures like Kozilek, Blightsteel, or Avacyn can just last through them, giving you one-sided board wipes. You also have creatures like Worldspine Worm and Woodfall Primus that are very board wipe resistant, if not totally indestructible. And then finally, if you're interested in controlling the board wiping everyone, maybe even board wiping yourself, you might want to consider a card like Shields of Velis Vale. It's an instant shapeshifter tribal spell for 1 mana that turns all your creatures into eggs. Alright everyone, I hope you enjoyed this deck tech of Atla Palani Nest Tender. This is a very interesting deck to build because it relies on some of the logic that you take from Polymorph, but it's a little bit different. And I think it requires a lot of interesting balance. You need some enablers in this deck. You also need some big fatties, and you need some redundancy, and you need some ways to control the board and ramp. You actually have to strike a very delicate balance between all of them. I think Atla is going to be a challenge to build, but a joy to tune. Hopefully you learned a little bit about how I'm approaching this deck and really the nuance between all of the moving parts and pieces. If you want to see the version I built, you can even use it as a template for building your own. Click on the link in the description and that will take you to tcgplayer.com. I tried to keep it relatively budget, around $150. Some people liked that price point from earlier, and I've decided to run with it. I know it's not totally budget, but hopefully you can either tune it up or tune it down from that stage. And I really appreciate you clicking on the links in the description because that lets TCG Player know that I sent you there, and that really helps me out a lot. And do you know what else helps me out a lot? My patrons. Thank you so much, patrons. You are a huge support. I have big things going on in my life, and if it wasn't for you, I don't know if I'd be making content right now. So thank you very much. And thank you for watching. If you like this video and want to see more, there's a subscribe button. You watch YouTube, you know how it works. Also, if you like this video, thumbs are good, so do that too. But most importantly, stay tuned because I've got some really great ideas and really fun decks from Commander 2019.